My name is Tony Jones, and you are tuned in to The Coalition, where we discuss all sides of local, regional, and national news, politics, and current events online at coalitionradio.us, on Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on Twitter at Coalition_radio. And you'll have to excuse me because I am currently recording an audio book, and I feel like I have just been swallowing razor blades all day. I feel awful. But we did have a fantastic guest scheduled tonight, and speaking of feeling awful, unfortunately, he can't join us in studio. He has the Rhode Island pandemic that is going around. It's like everybody is sick.
It's the end of the world as we know it. But I feel fine.
I refuse to get sick. I'm going with the mind over matter.
I, on the other hand, have actually been clinically dead for 11 years.
I'm shunning humanity until the pandemic passes. So,
is this like the Black Plague in Rhode Island? Is Connecticut can be shooting carcasses of bubonic plague-infected dead animals over the border?
I'm carrying a pocket full of posies with me to blot out the smell.
Leave it to us to make light of the end. And we do want to hear tonight from all you vaccine folks out there. We know you either feel very strongly for or against. So anything I can do to drive up the tension level on that end, we want you to know we're here for you. Okay? But, Tony, there's a couple of events coming up in the Liberty world that we'd like to talk about. You've got the second of your successful series of Liberty Drinks events.
I do. I have Liberty Drinks coming up Saturday, February 8th at Manchester 65 in West Lovely, Scenic,
Metropolitan,
sexy West Warwick, Rhode Island. It's on a Saturday this time, 7 to 9, so I got some feedback that a lot of people in the Liberty movement have these silly things called day jobs, and that it was tough for some people to get out on a Friday night, after working all week and all that. So I got some feedback that Saturday would work a little bit better. And then for our older crowd, so if you weren't there last time, Liberty Drinks goes from 7 to 9. Kindly, the owners of Manchester 65, if you're interested in the show that's going on after Liberty Drinks, you're welcome to stay there for free and enjoy the show and, hang out and drink some more. I got some feedback also last time from our older crowd. So it was a heavy metal show that was going on after Liberty Drinks. So that a little bit of the older crowd wasn't necessarily interested in death metal. If you can, surprisingly, I know.
Well, it is surprising, actually.
Wait a minute. As one of the older crowd here, I want you to know that.
You think the subject matter, at least, would be of interest.
I knew Ozzy before he was... Well, now Ozzy. So,
well, Ozzy is no longer really metal. The definition of metal has creeped over the years. I remember being a kid and thinking AC/DC was just the most incredibly hard music ever. Yeah. And now it's basically folk music.
There you go. So you're saying Ozzy's going to do an acoustic tour soon?
I'm saying Ozzy already sounds like he's doing an acoustic tour compared to some of these death metal bands.
There you go. But we had a great turnout last time. Of course, I missed it because I was in Alabama.
And that started the whole rumor that you and I were the same person.
Exactly. So I plan on being there, however, in appropriate disguise.
You'll be disguised as Tony Jones?
But we also have another event that's just been semi-announced. Tony, tell us about the Liberty Love Fest people. I believe they're looking at early... They're going to be at Manchester 65. I think they're looking at early April, I believe. We'll actually publish a link to that on the site today or tomorrow. But that's going to be at Manchester 65 as well. That is becoming fast the new headquarters, the home of rock and roll and liberty here in Rhode Island. It's they're going to have, at this point, they've got 3 to 4 bands scheduled. There's talk about having folks come up and give individual speeches on the different amendments to the Constitution. So it looks like it's going to be a heady mix of politics, demon alcohol, and rock and roll.
I need to hire a speechwriter, by the way, if any of you guys are interested, because I keep being asked to speak at things, and that's just silly to me. So I'm gonna maybe G. Gordon Liddy can write me a speech.
I'll write you speeches. Just give me the subject. I'll crank out a speech for you.
Or I'll just hide behind. Well, no, I can't hide behind you. I'll just stand behind you, and we'll do our best marionette.
Howdy doody time.
So stay posted for that. We're going to be publishing a number of events coming in as the weather thaws, and we exit the Arctic winter here in Rhode Island.
And go to Arctic, Rhode Island.
Exactly. And we'll let you know where you can party and talk politics at the same time.
My 2014 schedule is booking up nicely. I am painfully disorganized, though.
Is the Cretan 3, will they be appearing anytime soon?
We have a bunch of big shows coming up, yeah.
And Christine, our rock goddess here?
I actually have a gig basically an hour before Liberty Drinks.
Excellent.
On February 8th.
And
so that'll be at Fete in Providence. That's going to be at the Freak Fest. So folks could come see.
I haven't been invited to that.
Well, you're pretty freaky. You can come to that. You can come to that, and then we can carpool down to the Liberty Drinks event.
Okay.
I think that would work out well.
That's looking like a day there. That's looking like a day. Okay. So there you have it. That's the... now, of course, I'm surrounded by people with artistic talent and integrity. And then there's me. I have nothing really to offer whatsoever in the form of music or anything involving creativity. So, sorry, folks. I can just rant, and that's about all I do.
We need somebody in the audience to listen to these things, so that works out fine.
Fair enough. Now, as Tony mentioned to you, our scheduled guest unfortunately fell victim to the Rhode Island influenza. So what we've decided to do is we're going to try a little experiment here. We've got some things to talk about, but we're also opening up the Facebook and Twitter feed. So if you have questions about anything at all, no limits.
Just completely stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it's no safe word radio here, folks. So there's really no limits, no boundaries, no taste. So just feel free to posit anything. Tony, what are the links?
Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on Twitter @Coalition_radio. And unfortunately, we don't take phone calls because I don't know, P.O., if you've heard about these weirdos that just hang around and call talk radio all day.
Yeah, that would be me. I've only suffered from the fatal. They thought I said an obscenity once button. I was making a joke about a certain 1950s character, and they thought I said something else. So the Lynch brothers were on the air at the time. Patrick and who was that other guy? He was, I don't know, head of some Democratic Party or something.
Would this be a member of the Cleaver family?
Yeah, well, no. It was the Lynch family. It was far from the Cleavers.
No, but who was the 1950s television character you were joking about?
It was who was the really obnoxious one? You know, identify with him. The
Eddie Haskell?
Yeah, it was Eddie Haskell, and let's just say they didn't think I said Haskell.
Oh, okay.
Right. In which I got dumped. But later on that day, I got my revenge because I called into Buddy's show and I asked what I thought was an immortal question: if you were going to draw the Lynch family and draw an analogy to the Godfather series, all right, which brother would be Fredo? and I think there's ample opportunity to really evolve the Lynch family because the Lynch family does run the Pawtucket. Of course, Mr. Lynch, the Democratic Party head, then attempted to run for elected office and couldn't even get out of his own Democratic primary. So I'm not sure what that says for Democratic Party. Is there a head of the Democratic Party now?
I bet you it's because he didn't wait his turn.
That's right.
That could be part of it. I'm also fairly convinced that being the head of a party doesn't position you well to run for an office.
You're saying
you come across as the hatchet man. Nobody wants to elect the hatchet man.
Wait a minute. The Rhode Island Democratic Party has hatchet men?
Well, every party has hatchet men.
Ask John DePietro.
Is anybody ever going to vote for Karl Rove for an office?
I would because
you would do it out of spite.
Absolutely, Carl. If you're listening,
most of your votes are either out of spite or holding your nose and picking the least.
I was accused once of being a kind of punk rock Karl Rove because a lot of people don't realize that I'm more of, even though I do this and do music, I'm more of a behind the scenes guy. So I kind of have my hands in a lot of different places, behind the scenes type places, and I was accused of being Karl Rove-esque at one point. My feelings were hurt.
Your feelings should be hurt. That's a horrible thing to say to anyone. Even Karl Rove would be offended to be called Karl Rove.
So, we've got some issues on the horizon here in Rhode Island. Sure. We continue to wind our way inexorably to the conclusion or the beginning, I'm not sure if it even matters, of the Republican primaries. And this week we retreated to Alan Fung's, I believe, the beginning of Alan Fung's demise as a statewide party candidate. For anyone not familiar, it's been alleged, purportedly, that the Cranston Police Department initiated a ticket binge based on the alleged voting patterns of certain city councilmen against a police contract. Regardless of how you feel about that, you've got the apologists calling in and saying, well, that's their right to ticket and these people broke the law, which is astonishing. I just never knew that discretionary use of police power for political motivation was somehow okay. The very fact that Alan Fung fostered an environment where that was thought to be okay, because remember, if you're the mayor of the city, you are the CEO. You are the Grand Poobah, the Chief Water Buffalo, the High Exalted Ruler. And you create the corporate culture, if you will, for that town. You and the major elected officials. So clearly, the Cranston Police Department, it's now being turned out in a story in Go Local Prov, appears to have been major contributors, the police union, to Mr. Fung, seem to think that was okay. Since then, he's fumbled and bumbled his way. Now we've got the Rhode Island State Police running the Cranston, Rhode Island Police Department. We've got the police chief put on indefinite, but of course, only in Rhode Island, paid leave. And you've got a mayor waffling at one point, rather than just call in the state police initially and just eliminate all the Sturm and Drang. He at first, cited the ubiquitous Policeman's Code of Rights or whatever, Bill of Rights Then he actually went out and hired a New Jersey firm to analyze the situation. And then we find ourselves in this situation where the stateies have taken over Cranston, which, let's think about that for a second. Even in Rhode Island, it's astonishing to think of that a major city's police department is deemed so incapable of self-management that essentially the National Guard's being called in. I don't know in my lifetime if I've heard anything like this from a real city.
That's the sort of thing you expect from the Boondocks. Your idea of bumbling the Andy Griffith Show, but where everybody's a Barney. This shouldn't be happening in Cranston.
Oh, your car is going to be gone when you leave here today.
Well, ultimately, it's clear that Mr. Fung is not ready for prime time. Like I said, you create the environment, you create the petri dish.
I don't know about that. How many politicians nowadays get away with that stuff? They do until they get caught.
Well, what's interesting, he was waffling, he's trying to waffle his way through it, almost simultaneous with the Chris Christie disclosures. All of a sudden he came, as Mayor Cianci would say, came Coco, and decided that, and I don't know if the timing was ubiquitous, coincidental, or timely. But, all of a sudden you had this rush to judgment because of the inevitable comparisons that were being drawn between Mr. Christie and Mr. Fung.
Right.
Political motivation is not supposed to drive law enforcement.
Absolutely not. Political motivation shouldn't drive any number of things. It shouldn't drive law enforcement. It shouldn't drive whether or not a swimming pool is getting closed. Right.
And as you bring up, the next point that was drawn was the fallen angel, our mayor in La Prove, ultimately falling prey to the same type of issue. You've got, of all of these people running for governor, alleged or otherwise, it would appear that the only person who seems to have a program and a clue is the Kenneth Block who is running for governor. He's come forward with an economic plan. Now, you can debate the merits of it. You can debate his ability to actually fulfill it, given our recalcitrant state legislature, but he's got a plan that he's clearly articulating. On top of that, to his credit, given the scandal or the near scandal that approached when it appears that the state violated the open meetings laws in generating the the bid that wasn't bid out for the probation department to be located downtown, he has actually filed a criminal complaint against a number of people involved in that decision. So you've got Block on the outside coming in. Mr. Napolitano from the Lincoln Republican Party just joined his campaign. Not surprisingly, the Cranston people have endorsed, in a move of stunning political courage, have endorsed Mr. Fung.
What a surprise.
There you go. But although, how cool would it have been if they bailed on him? That's just,
that would have actually been a significant and noteworthy thing to have happen.
Right. But who in their right mind gives money to an Alan Fung campaign at this point?
I don't know who gives money to any campaign right now, unless you're trying to get credit early. But it seems to me...
Wait a minute, are you alleging that people give money to campaigns not out of a sincere desire to promote the idealistic virtue and position of a campaign?
I would never suggest such a thing.
Okay, or are you saying that people are actually...
I might say it blatantly.
Okay, all
yeah.
Right. Wow. On behalf of all Rhode Island political hacks everywhere, I'm hurt.
It seems to me that we're approaching a point where anybody who's currently in office or recently in office will end up having some skeletons in their closet.
True.
that make them a little questionable.
Well, I mean,
we can point fingers at this or that politician for using their office inappropriately or for allowing people under them to behave inappropriately, political retribution. How widespread is it? How much of it are we missing?
Oh, true. I mean,
how many other towns are under the influence of police who are writing tickets selectively to people who are out of favor?
And absent the mainstream media performing any investigative role, although to his credit, Channel 10 seems to have exposed some of this. Mm-hmm. Most of these folks are masters of after-the-fact reporting.
Right.
They're great at following up on the story that's already been blasted.
Although, to be fair, there's no way that the media would find out that certain people were being targeted for tickets until those people step forward and complain about it.
True, but
once the complaints start, someone has to take the initiative and start speaking up about it, and not wait for the tiny papers and the blogs to pick up the story. What
do you think went through their mind, Tony and Chris? You always have the joke. I work in the car business, and the analogy I often draw is if anyone has ever seen a Chevrolet Aveo, it is potentially one of the worst pieces of equipment ever manufactured. And yet at the same time, I mean, this thing is just junk. Sorry if anybody out there is driving one. All right, you should see what I drive. But this just pure garbage. All right, to quote Mr. Zambeto.
Is it worse than the Pontiac Aztek?
Yes.
Because that's sort of my benchmark for a horrifying car.
No. I mean, Pontiac Aztek, by the way, just trivia here, had one of the highest initial quality ratings of any vehicle, but it was just the...
It looks like a garbage truck.
Right. And here's some trivia. What's notable in a Rhode Island sense, because it always comes back to Rhode Island, about the Pontiac Aztek?
I do not know.
The initial Survivor winner was
Richard Hatch.
In fact, one of his prizes was a Pontiac Aztek,
and he spiraled out of control.
So did he drive around town collecting garbage in it?
It actually had an accessory where you pop the hatch and it turned into a tent.
That's pretty useful. I will give him that.
In this economy,
that's an
$800 a month apartment in some neighborhoods.
Exactly. I'm going to have to eat my words and go get myself an old Pontiac.
Scenic view, everything included.
But so the Chevrolet Aveo is just pure garbage. All right, and so what's astonishing about that is not that it's junk, because there's lots of junk out there, but dozens of highly compensated General Motors executives at one point or another got into a room, looked at that junk, and said, wow, this is a really great idea. So at what point did the people who run the Cranston Police Department get together and say, let's give everybody a ticket tonight. They'll never notice.
I was just talking to my guest on the Tony Jones show yesterday about the fact that no matter what you do, music, art, filmmaking, politics, no matter what you do, you will spiral out of control if you are only surrounded by yes men. I was talking to someone this week, and I said, I think I'm going to do a radio broadcast highlighting the music of World War I, and they were kind enough to say to me, dude, that's stupid.
There may be a market for that, but you need to find those people. Or like oddball historians, but you need to know where those people are and get them to listen before you present that.
I don't know, a thrash version of Over There. I think it's got some merit to it. No, right?
Actually, in our days of perpetual warfare, I would agree.
Really, P.O.? really?
Oh, my word.
Isn't there a little switch on that you can turn off?
Oh, my word.
What are you going to sell someone an Aztec? Is that why that's going
Yeah.
off?
The show is spiraling out of control.
Someone's calling to complain about you bad-mouthing the mayor.
But you're right. The legions of yes men that surround this state, the press hackenistas, the coat hangers, the ne'er-do-wells, the wannabes that surround the decision-making process in this state. Again, how did they get from point A to point B and not understand that this would become, I don't know, in some circles an issue? Is government in this state that removed from the individual?
They thought that they would get away with it. That's what it comes down to.
That suggests to me that people do get away with it.
Yeah, and if anyone's got any comments about things that have gotten away from it, let us know. But
yeah, well, take a look at the Cianci administration, or either of the Cianci administrations. The first time he was in office, when he left, pleading nolo, 25 of his aides are indicted on corruption charges.
Are you saying there's a coincidence?
Total coincidence, I'm sure.
Okay.
The second time he was in office, people were convicted, including he himself.
Right.
And what that suggests to me is that they got away with it until they didn't.
Until
and
what?
I think a lot of politicians, they get into office and they get away with stuff until they don't.
But
so the Christie administration, I have no idea whether he knew what was going on or not, but it's pretty clear from the emails that were exchanged by his staff, they assumed that what they were doing was A-OK.
Right, and given the fact that so many of these successful politicians, and when I say politician, I'm combining the role of governor or mayor with the art of retail politics. So many of these successful ones are the ultimate micromanagers. I mean, Buddy had his finger on the pulse of everything going on in Providence. Chris Christie, by all accounts, I follow him fairly closely. I'm from New Jersey, was clearly the most micro of micromanagers when it came to retail politics. So how could they not know?
Right.
But then again, as in the question with Fung, if you've created a climate where it's okay to do seemingly horrific things, no one died in Cranston. In the case of Chris Christie, it's alleged that one woman ultimately died. You'll never be able to draw a direct link between the extended period of time based on the traffic conditions on the closed ramps up to the bridge that caused an extended period of response to her.
There's no way of knowing whether she would have died regardless.
Right.
But the question will always be hanging there.
Right. You see, you can't throw out the ad hominem attack no matter how much I want to. But ultimately, what goes through people's minds? The same situation in Central Falls. We often talk about how the people who work in Central Falls were, projected as the victims. Yet in a small town like that, how could you not know? How could you not see the abuses?
Right.
The homes getting boarded up, the excessive overtime, the constant deficits. And yet, one state senator, Ms. Crowley, who was I believe the former town clerk for Central Falls. And if you've ever worked in a municipality, the town clerk is clearly knows where everybody is buried.
Right.
How could she avoid the imminent demise? And yet everyone is shocked that this happened.
Yeah.
So in a state like Rhode Island, here's what's infuriating. You've got all these people who are supposed to be, they're supposed to catch this stuff. There's you've got an Auditor General for the state of Rhode Island, and yet, here's a trivia question for the week. Can anyone tell me $5 gift card from our favorite coffee shop, the Coffee Exchange, all right, for the name of the Attorney General? I'm sorry, the Auditor General. Well, actually, the Attorney General as well. Last seen on a milk carton. Can anyone name anyone in Rhode Island government who is acting right now as some sort of watchdog?
I certainly can't. And, I'm somewhat embarrassed to say that I don't know who the Auditor General is.
We know who he was. It was Ernie Almonte, who is now running for treasurer. We have yet to hear from that campaign. That campaign's not making much noise. The Almonte, but and then again, Ernie Almonte was the Auditor General during, and by the way, that's an appointed position. That's essentially a highly compensated political position. It's not elected.
And apparently it's not a very demanding job because we never seem to hear anything from them.
Right. Well, that's because everything is running so well here.
Yeah.
It's
really awesome in Rhode Island where everything runs well and there's no political corruption and the police aren't running wild in the streets, sticking tickets on cars only of people who are annoying the mayor, stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's sleep tight, Vote Island. Sleep tight.
And I think it plays into the demise of journalism and the corporate control of broadcasting, because there are very few muckrakers left out there.
Right.
There's a few people out there like me who just don't care and have nothing better to do than be a jerk. But your traditional run-of-the-mill paid media people who do this for a living, the traditional ad scheme is gone, and therefore their job is gone, because you can only sell so many obituaries.
Right. Yeah,
although that could be the next thing. Cops could go around killing people for more obituaries to keep the Projo afloat, to keep journalism going. There's a conspiracy wormhole for you.
It would be easier to forge obituaries or something. There's got to be an angle.
Those are the people that vote in the Democratic primary, right?
Easy enough to find them. Well, in a related article today in Go Local Prov, they talk about the troubles that the Hartford Courant is running into. Now, at one point in time, as recently as 7 or 8 years ago, you had a half a dozen premium newspapers here in New England. And clearly the top three were the Boston Globe, the Hartford Courant, and the Providence Journal. In its stunningly similar fashion, the Hartford Courant is now sort of spiraling out of control. Bought up by a major corporation, then ultimately, like the Below Joe, split apart into a newspaper-only functionality, labeled, or I should say, larded with all sorts of overhead, interest costs, rent costs, internal costs, and like every other newspaper that's just about met its demise, it's layoffs of content. And Tony, what's the most important thing in new media?
As long as the sports page is still in the traditional media, they're covered. And for me personally, as long as they keep running Dilbert, I'm happy. But
and also pointless surveys, because I want to feel like I'm engaged and making a difference by clicking A or B.
The pointless surveys are huge for new media. It just it goes nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the local media has become HuffPosted to death. So you've got the three principal newspapers. I will point out, if anyone's had a chance to read the Lowell paper, that's probably one of the last true newspapers left in New England where they've got editors and editorials and regional people out. And so it's worth a search and worth a look online, because you'll probably find out more about what's really going on in New England than any of those three principal papers. And all three of those papers are either for sale, that we talked about, or have been sold.
And why would someone buy the Providence Journal at this point? The Below company,
real estate.
The Below company basically squashed it. They gutted it.
Real estate.
The incredibly shrinking journal.
Real estate. The same thing with the Boston Globe.
You mean for the building itself?
Yeah. The Boston Globe, the book value of the property that the Boston Globe is on far exceeds the book value of the newspaper itself.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all.
You go to a centralized printing operation, you move everybody to rented space somewhere, or whoever's left, you can most of the newspaper from the AP, and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, you pocket millions of dollars. John Henry of Boston Red Sox fame did it. The guy's a brilliant investor. He basically stole the operation.
Right.
And if he can scale it down and figure out a way to make money on operations, it's a shadow of its former self. So who's left?
Grab a bunch of kids from Rhode Island College willing to work for $12 an hour.
Well, maybe the Boston Globe and the Providence Journal should merge and set up shop in Attleboro, and their fabulous downtown offices can be used for something else. Although I don't know if the Providence building at this point, I think at this point we have a surplus of office space with the Superman building. Right.
And therein lies the controversy, because that's the neighborhood they wanted to pop down the probation office in.
Right.
No deals that work there, hey? So it's just sad to see a municipality like Cranston, which on the surface had been relatively well run, despite the constant barrage of tax increases that Mayor Fung, even as an alleged conservative Republican, had inflicted on the town. It's just sad to see it come to this point. I can't imagine how individuals feel who have to do business, who have lifetime investments in a town like that, as they see the schools crumble, as they see the government crumble, and literally become, for all intents and purposes, taken over.
Right.
When you talk about wannabes, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that a quick reminder to everybody that the two GOP candidates for governor who are battling it out, kind of like semi-battling it out, are reluctant Republicans. So Alan Fung first approached the Democratic Party of Cranston interested in running for mayor, and they said, we're all set, and he ran as a Republican. And then, of course, you have Mr. Block, who founded his own party, left it in the dust, and said, I guess I'll become a Republican. So your only two candidates are reluctant Republicans.
Well, as Jerry Seinfeld likes to quote, we're all rooting for laundry, right? So at a certain point, ultimately, is the Republican Party in the state nothing more than a prepaid line on a ballot? Has it been reduced to that, effectively?
It's a placeholder.
They stand for nothing. During Costa this past week, you were all, I don't know if you caught that. Interestingly enough, this wasn't played up in the media as much as I thought it would have been.
That's not really surprising since the media isn't really covering much.
Well, no, but normally it's sort of like moths to the flame. They have this driver's ed-like affinity for covering all things Costa. She resigned after just 7 months as the treasurer of the Rhode Island GOP.
I can't believe it took her 7 months to get a good look at the books.
Yeah, well, she was busy. She was busy counting raffle ticket income.
She was busy hanging out with Wildside Clyde.
Right.
Well, they spent all this money refurbing a call center. Okay.
That would be great if this was 1983.
I hear the Republican Party just discovered 800 numbers.
Hey, maybe they could buy their own AM radio station.
There are a few available for sale.
That's true.
Seriously
refurbishing a call center.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they
wow.
That is their crown jewel this election cycle.
And a training center for putative candidates.
Okay. Training in what? Dialing a phone?
No, not quite sure. But just after 7 months, she resigned.
How to get spanked and not take it personally.
She's going to work for HJJ. So, I didn't even know are they still in the air?
A little bit. They do play Coast to Coast AM. It's one of my favorite radio shows of all times.
Is that the Red Eye Radio people?
That's like George Norrie and Art Bell, and they talk about Sasquatches and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. So all right. So what's more alien than the Rhode Island Republican Party?
The fact that she went from being the treasurer of the Republican Party to trying to sell broadcast ads, which P.O., painfully personal, is just a total, like we mentioned earlier, dead ad scheme. It's like from going bad to worse, really.
Well, we are getting into the silly season, though.
Right, but
HJJ, the same people who think building a call center is a good idea probably think advertising on HJJ is a good idea.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, but interestingly enough, one of the least discussed, and actually PRO brought this up this week, when you sell advertisements to political campaigns, by law, you have to sell it at the lowest available rate.
Right.
You have to match essentially any lower, and that's auditable. I mean, that's something, it's taken very seriously. So you have a station, and you can always tell a station, like a big commercial station like a PRO, HJJ, how successful they are by running PSAs. If they're running a lot of PSAs, aren't we about to go to break?
Speaking of PSAs,
the ad department didn't meet budget last month. So, PRO, who was the subject of this boycott, interestingly enough, can now look at some of these candidates and say, forget about it, and not take a haircut on the ad rates. So it remains to be seen. You've got millions of dollars in pent-up money, where they're going to advertise.
Wait, who has millions of dollars of pent-up money?
Misery Monday. Well, I think pent-up. I think Gina Raimondi.
Well, she's going big on new media. If you cannot look at Facebook without seeing Gina Raimondo baking cookies.
Because cookie baking is really the most important thing for me in a gubernatorial candidate.
Well, after the break, Christine, I want to ask you. It was a great segue. As a modern, feminist, accomplished, Ivy League educated woman, I'm going to let this question hang out there. How do you feel about Gina Raimondi, all right, essentially trying to become Susie Q. Homemaker in her campaign ads?
A little piece of Tony Jones trivia. Even though she's old enough to be my mother, actually possibly old enough to be my grandmother, I find Martha Stewart very attractive. So let that resonate as we go to break. You're tuned into the Coalition online, coalitionradio.us, on Facebook, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on Twitter Coalition_radio. The Ken Block not running for governor checking in on the Facebook. We'll get to his questions and a little bit more right after the break.
Radio show, live events, and so much more. Check them out online at 13folds.com. That's the number 13, FOLDS.com.
My name is Angel Rach. I'm a mother of 2 teenage children, and I fought all the way to the Supreme Court for the right to use the medicine that saved my life. I've been permanently disabled for 10 years, with an inoperable brain tumor, wasting syndrome, and several other serious conditions. For 4 years, I was in a wheelchair, in so much pain, I couldn't even hug my kids. The hardest part was looking in their eyes and seeing how much they were suffering because of my medical condition. The medicine that gave me my life back and gave my kids their mom back was cannabis, also known as medical marijuana. With medical marijuana, I can walk, maintain my weight, and I can be a mom. Without it, my doctors believe that I would die. To learn more about medical marijuana, contact Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or on the web at mpp.org.
Hey everybody, it's Tony Jones. You know, when I'm not here yakking about politics, I spin records. That's right, if you like good old-fashioned rock and roll radio the way God intended it to be, then tune in to The Tony Jones Show. The information's online at tonyjones.org. That's tonyjones.org.
Heading out on the town tonight? Be sure to log on to providencenightout.com and don't forget to check their cell phone app. That's providencenightout.com.
Tony Jones here. You are tuned in to the Coalition, coalitionradio.us. Christina's here. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
The PO taxpayer. PO, good evening.
Feeling particularly Poe this week.
Poe or PO'd, or both?
A mix of the two?
A mix of the two.
So Kenneth Block, which unceremoniously had to change his Facebook name, checking in over at facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. PO, he is posing an interesting question.
Yeah, Kenneth, and let me see if I can read this directly. In an article today, a woman lamenting the loss of her unemployment benefits says she would go on welfare. Aren't unemployment benefits welfare, or is it something people earn by paying into the system? There's a lot of urban legends surrounding this, and as someone who's quite capable of inventing his own, let me see if I can explain appropriately. Unemployment insurance is a fund paid into by employers. So in a very real sense, although it's not directly paid by the employee, in a very real sense, it's a pay-as-you-go, earn-your-way system that people have earned, like Social Security, minus their own personal contribution. Interestingly enough, a few years ago, we had a situation in Rhode Island, and I believe it's still pretty close to broke, where the unemployment insurance fund was going broke. They were in default or near default of some federal loans to the unemployment insurance situation. So in a movement that just screamed Little Rhodey, they raised the unemployment insurance rate on the few people who were still employing left in the state. It was magic. It was like your own corporate death tax.
And the people that worked for the office went on unemployment.
There you go. Which, by the way, the office is run by a gentleman who was once lieutenant governor and who is never, to my knowledge, actually held gainful employment.
Talk about welfare.
Gainful employment outside of state elected office or appointed office. So you've got this, you're talking about a vicious cycle.
Right.
But it raises a great point. To me, it's not welfare, unemployment insurance, up until a particular point. The national debate seems to center around the fact that once you exceed that period, and that statutory period of time differs by state, all right? At what point in time do you cut off unemployment insurance? As a middle-aged guy who sees, very much suffers from the there but for the grace of God go I syndrome, I'm loath, even as a libertarian, to just cut off hardworking people. On the other hand, no one seems to want to cut anything to pay for it. What do we do, Chris?
It's a tough one. It really is a tough one because you're right. Nobody wants to cut anything to pay for it. Everyone disagrees about what should be cut. Everyone's basically, you all in Radio Land can't see me, but there's the people pointing fingers in opposite directions. We should cut your cash cow or your pet peeve, not mine. And
right.
I don't know the answer.
But how long is too long?
What I would really like to see, I don't know, because I know people between my age and your age, between your age and retirement age, who cannot find a job. They're skilled, smart people. They're aged out of the system. They're being prejudged because they're a certain age. What do you tell these people?
Right, and so the inevitable question then, once the music stops, and it will stop even at the 99 weeks.
Right.
What happens then when these people have to go on some type of assistance?
Right, and I would like to see our government, at the state level, at the local level, at the national level, putting a lot more effort into finding ways to employ people.
Right,
there are things that need to be done. We're not doing them.
So is it the state's job to either create an environment where jobs are welcome and can be created?
It is this. Well, we've talked about that before. It is to some extent the state's job to support businesses, to create business-friendly environments. And frankly, if you're walking around Providence, on my drive over here today, I dodged about 8 massive potholes.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm talking about axle busters. I'm not talking little itty-bitty things. I'm talking, main roads, driving down South Main Street, and it's like...
Well, you have to be of a certain age to get this analogy, but the Hope Street Ho Chi Minh Trail analogy is very...
Well, I was about to say Fallujah, but then I felt bad. Because
we know people who've been in Fallujah lately. But Ho Chi Minh Trail, of course, was the lifeline of the Viet Cong in the 1960s in Vietnam, and was routinely bombed by B-52s.
Right.
And Hope Street looks a lot... And didn't we just have a multi-million-dollar bomb? Anyway, to get back to the subject.
Yeah, we have things that need fixing, and that at the state level, at the national level, there are things that need to be done. There are industries that could be supported, and I don't mean massive government handouts. I mean finding ways to support small businesses that want to open, finding ways to make it easier to open a small business. Maybe not supporting or favoring the big businesses to quite the extent that we do, leveling the playing field a little bit.
And by the way, this has been going on for years, and I can remember it quite well. Years ago, I was dating a girl who lived in Providence, and the roads were so crappy to drive to her apartment that I actually thought about breaking up with her for the simple fact that I was hitting all those potholes and it was just wrecking my car, like driving to this girl's house. It was almost a relationship ender.
Do I get a dinner out, or do I do an alignment?
Right. Yeah, basically. I mean, I went to Firestone a while back and sprung for the lifetime alignment, which cost twice as much as the regular, because I knew I would need it.
Well, wait.
I've already more than made my money back on that.
There's a revenue idea. We in addition to health insurance, in addition to unemployment insurance, maybe the city of Providence should start selling alignment policies.
No, the city of Providence would lose money on that.
Honestly, I would buy that if that was real.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody would buy it, and the city of Providence would go broke because, although that might give them an incentive to actually fix the potholes.
So you take someone in their 50s who at this point has been unemployed or substantially underemployed for 2 to 3 years, who it's clear is probably never going to make the kind of income they were, if in fact there's any income stream out there at all. One of my pet peeves is people's reluctance to leave Rhode Island to find employment, because there is employment in other parts of New England.
But there may not be employment in other parts of New England for people over the so-called certain age.
Right.
And that's the tough thing.
But
there are reports from all over the country from people who, our country used to specifically value seasoned employees in a way that it really doesn't anymore.
No, they become throwaways.
Yeah.
It's I work in sales, so if I generate numbers, I'm employed.
Exactly. As long as your numbers are high, everything's hunky dory.
Right.
But if your company goes out of business, which it won't, but if your company goes out of business,
I need a butler.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Would you like to buttle for me?
All right, Jeeves.
I don't know. What are the hours?
So my response is, unemployment insurance is not welfare. I believe that there is a systemic approach to it. I do believe that we really have to start capping at a certain point. Chris or Tony, do you feel that people are holding back on their job hunting efforts anecdotally?
You know what is welfare? Working as a communications consultant for Don Kachuri for $100,000 a year and not doing anything.
That is welfare. I would like
That's
that job.
welfare.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. In a story that I'm working on, let me just throw in an aside. I called the State Department of Transportation this week. They have no fewer than 8 people working in their air quotes here, information center as communications people.
Ooh.
All right. So I've asked them for an approximation of what the budget is, and this all ties everything in. The welfare question, the pothole question. On one hand, the Department of Transportation in the state cries poverty at every single moment, although they managed to they did go to the major leagues and get Boston's cast-off former DOT, the guy who did the big dig, Michael Lewis, as a director. All right, they're crying poverty and they're crying poor mouth. You've got 8 people working in communications? Really? You've got a hotline for DOT. What does the hotline say when everything sucks? I mean, yes, what's a classic line? I'm sorry you feel that way.
Well, I think they probably read in some management book somewhere that letting people vent is better than not letting them vent.
Right.
So that's what the hotline is for.
Right. So instead of spending the money to actually...
Yeah. Well,
fix the problem.
Well, there might actually be instances where people report something that they consider enough of an emergency that they send trucks out to fix it.
Right.
There's an extremely strong smell of gas at the corner of X and Y.
Well, but if you're ultimately not one of the top 2 or 3 media moguls in the state, you don't get to speak to Michael Lewis.
Oh, I'm sure.
You just don't. You get switched directly over. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I guess depending on your media clout, and as we all know, I am the king of media. Yeah, you don't get to talk to them. You get to talk to an underling. And they're very, very nice, and they're very, very professional. Of course, as state employees, they can be.
Right.
I mean, they don't really have to fix anything. They just communicate. So you've got this hideous mix, this hideous stew of transfer payments being made to individuals in excess of what their employers contributed into, us borrowing money to cover them, while at the same time taxpayer resources, which could make Providence and Rhode Island a better place to do business in, the DOT, instead being spent on communicating just how pathetic the situation is. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a recipe to failure for me.
Oh, yeah. Well, you probably do know this. Businesses with a pattern of frequent layoffs end up getting charged more in unemployment insurance.
Right. So why hire the people in the first place?
Yeah, well, I think it's meant to get people to be realistic about their hiring.
Which is to say, in Rhode Island, not to.
And or not be abusive. Yeah, well, in Rhode Island, you're going to think twice about hiring someone. Because
ultimately, we penalize the very few people who legitimately are trying to create wealth here in the state.
Although I've heard of some abuses as well. There was a case a while back, 10, 15 years ago. A well-known restaurant in the downtown area was closed for a couple of months for renovations, which basically meant all of their wait staff had no income coming in. Mm-hmm. And they tried to strong-arm their wait staff and their kitchen staff into not applying for unemployment during that renovation because they didn't want their rates to go up.
Right.
And yet they weren't offering to pay these folks.
And you've got the seasonal companies as well that have been doing that.
I think seasonal companies, there's some sort of an exemption. I think if you categorize someone as an employee, as a seasonal employee, you pay a different rate or it doesn't affect your... You don't get penalized for it.
The real question is does it become welfare once people who have paid into the system at a certain point in time
have exceeded their
the investment made by their former employers? I guess you have to say it is.
I guess technically it is, but it's not. It seems unfair to blame the people collecting if they're genuinely out there looking for jobs, which I think for the most part people do.
But the question of the week seems to be: do people wait to look for jobs? Until
my guess would be some do, but not to the extent that
the people
that
who
the
are
scaremongers tend to
I guess you've always heard the term race baiter. The people who are welfare baiters, if you will, the type of people who come across with the big judgments, the big pronouncements. I'm for personal responsibility. Ultimately, what happens when one day they find themselves in the same position?
Right.
And at a certain point, if we cut the safety net completely, do we have people starving? I mean, these are people who were primarily were middle class.
Yeah. People
who had gainful employment for an extended period of time. And now you cut out what's left of the middle class by not helping these people.
Right. And unemployment benefits, they don't match what you made before. There's some, I think it's 60%, some multiple like that. It's not, you're not living high off the hog on unemployment.
No, not at all.
So unless being on unemployment enables you to stay home with your kids where you were paying, high daycare rates before, you're definitely at a financial disadvantage. So I think that itself is some incentive to look for another job.
It was always intended to be a bridge.
Yeah.
To your next career.
Yeah, and I think most people take it that way. If you're not making what you made before, and most people reach a standard of living that they need to keep paying for. If you bought a new car, you need to keep paying for that car. You need to make those car payments. Those don't magically get cut to 60% of what they were before, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Your mortgage doesn't magically...
That explains a lot.
Yeah, your mortgage doesn't magically go away. Your student loans don't magically go away, although you can get deferments temporarily. But your expenses are what they are, and your income is 60% of what it was before.
Wow.
So I think most people are still going to be out there looking for jobs.
In the remaining few minutes of the show, I'd like to get back to the Gino Raimondi question.
Oh, the cookies question?
The cookies question. And let me just reframe this. As Tony pointed out, we've all been treated, if you're a Facebooker, you've all been treated to the image of Gino Raimondi around the Christmas tree, baking cookies. I come from a family where, quite frankly, both in my current relationship and the household I grew up in, where the women, quite honestly, were a lot smarter than the men. I know it's a stretch. We've gotten to know each other now. A lot smarter, a lot more articulate, able to maintain long-term relationships. I mean, everything that I'm not. So I'm used to being surrounded by smart, powerful women.
Well, they put up with you. They haven't kicked you out yet, so...
Yeah.
You must have something going for you.
Yeah, we're working on that. But
see, I think the alternative candidate should take the same approach. So when I go on Facebook, I should see Todd Giroux around a water bong and talking about legalization.
Actually, I want to see a bake-off.
But is it for on one hand, you've got the Raimondi campaign, and this is their own generated ads, pointing out that Rhode Island needs a woman governor.
And they're using cookies.
Well, but no, that's in another set of ads. You have this incredibly mixed message. On one hand, you've got the Raimondi campaign saying Rhode Island needs a woman governor. I never knew that there was a gender-based litmus test for and anyone who's read anything about Nikki Haley in South Carolina realizes that there's not an automatic assumption that women are going to do a better job just because they're governor. All right. So anyway, so you've got that, and then you've got this other image, which is to appeal to the soccer mom, the stay-at-home mom mentality. Make her a warmer and fuzzier person. She may have just croaked your pension, but. No, she likes Toll House.
Where did you see the cookie ads?
It's all on Facebook. I mean, Tony's spot on.
That's what I find strange. Because Facebook is this alleged new media, and you'd think that would be the way they'd be trying to reach out to younger voters.
Or is it just throw whatever you can up on the wall and see what sticks?
Maybe that's it.
And just the sheer fact that they have $2 million to blow.
How much? What is Google AdWords going for these days?
$1 million got Twin River, a casino in the state. They have $2 million. I have a stack here of Twin River Vote Yes on Question Whatever stickers that they sent out to all the radio stations as part of their $1 million worth of ad buying.
Now, that's baffling. What do they think a radio station is going to do with the stack of stickers?
We put them on local ministers' cars.
You can't use them as toilet paper. People don't. There isn't some massive stream of people.
You can't smoke them.
Yeah, you can't smoke them. You can't use them as TP. There is no massive stream of the public who walks in and out of radio station buildings. That's really kind of strange.
But the question is Gina the anti-feminist now, or is she I mean, what's your reaction?
Maybe it's meant to be post-feminist. I don't know. I'm not real comfortable with the idea of a candidate running on the grounds of I'm a woman, therefore I'm better at this. Because, the flip side of that, men running on the platform of I'm a man, therefore I'm better at this is kind of ridiculous.
Particularly if you did a calendar of the men of Rhode Island.
I think it's great that we have women in politics that are reaching prominent positions, and I think we should keep supporting them if their ideas are good, if they have executive skills, and so on. But running a campaign that basically announces I have 2 X chromosomes. This is a particular reason to
Hear
vote
me
for
roar.
me. Yeah. Here I am with my 2 X chromosomes. It just seems a little odd.
The next question, of course,
the cookie
is...
thing I don't get.
I feel like the fact that I'm a fat white guy makes me better at radio, though. Especially traditional radio.
It could.
But here's the next question.
Okay.
Will it work?
I don't know. It didn't work for Hillary.
That's true. She
In fact,
worked very hard at...
She worked very hard at that, and I noticed that women roughly her age, plus or minus 10 years, were very much inspired by her candidacy, particularly the fact that she was this hardworking woman whose turn it was. It's, quote, our turn. Younger women were a bit uncomfortable with that.
And any time it reaches a cult-like phenomenon, like some of the Hillary supporters... That makes me nervous.
Well, we have so many candidates who try to stir up a cult of some sort. And, in the short term, it looks good for them to have this rabid group of fans who show up at their events and support them no matter what they say, the yes men. But it makes everybody outside that campaign uncomfortable.
Are there blockheads out there?
I'm sure there are blockheads out there.
Kenneth, by the way, I'm not running for Governor Block. We nominate you to be the first blockhead.
To those of you listening out in Radio Land, we have a Facebook friend and fan whose name is Kenneth Block. He's not running for governor.
Right.
He's not related to the Kenneth Block who is running for governor.
And yet gets perpetually friended and then defriended by people who are severely disappointed and
to discover that he's not running for governor
because they have governor candidate envy. So it's. I unfortunately feel it will work to a degree. I just don't know if she can overcome the anti-union vote.
I think it'll neutralize itself. I think some people will be moved by the whole cookie baking, and some will not be moved by it.
I'm moved.
I like cookies.
Yeah, but
if she's going to bake cookies, I'll show up to one of her events and try a cookie.
But the younger folks who are typically tuned into alternative media and the digital world, aren't they jaded and cynical and smart enough to look at this and their BS meter goes off the charts?
You have to remember that primary turnout is going to be, once again, it's a non-presidential election season. It is going to be painfully low. So if you can get a handful of cookie lovers to actually physically show up and vote in the primary, that's going to swing it.
Yeah, I think she's trying to distract people from the brouhaha over the pensions.
The kinder, gentler, softer Gina?
The hedge fund, what's going on with that?
I would love...
It is the gentler, softer Gina. I like cookies, but I'm not necessarily voting for people on the basis of who bakes the best cookies.
Well, I would love to have seen the focus testing that probably went on when deriving everything from the music for the ads to the colors. When you've got that kind of money, you drill down, nothing is left to chance.
Right.
You find out if people feel warmer about a red apron or a blue apron,
right,
or a green apron. All right, you feel,
Well, I'm also wondering whether... Is Facebook now sophisticated enough that you can target your ads based on demographics?
Right. Well, it depends, of course, if any reasonable percentage of Facebook profiles are actually accurate.
Yeah.
So for New Year's Eve, I dialed in. For our New Year's Eve broadcast, I dialed into people in Attleboro, in Providence, who liked rock and roll, psychobilly, and politics. So that is how, to a gnat's behind, you can dial in. So,
okay.
P.O., because you and I are politically active, chances are that's why we're seeing these painful ads over and over again. We do got to get out of here, guys.
Wow.
I know. That hour just, as usual, flew by. Great job as always, Chris. Great job as always, P.O.
Thanks, bud.
CoalitionRadio.us, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on Twitter @Coalition_Radio.